We have been taught a lot to intellectualize our feelings, and I thought for years that I was really in tune with my emotions because I could intellectualize them so much. And what I realized is that that was part of my process of managing my alexithymia. I could think about my emotions. Thinking about your emotions and feeling them in your body are completely different things. Hello and welcome to Divergent Paths. I'm your host, Dr. Regina McMenomy. I am a doctor, but not that kind of doctor, and this is a podcast, not medical advice. Today, my co-host Russ from the DIY for Business podcast and I are digging into emotional contagion and alexithymia, two experiences that can really mess with your neurodivergent brain. Emotional contagion is when you absorb someone else's emotions without realizing it. Alexithymia is when you can't name your own. Put them together, you feel everything and understand none of it. If you've ever asked, why am I like this? This episode might have some answers. So stay tuned, and thanks for listening to Divergent Paths.
You usually give me one topic, one thing to learn about.
I do,
within
usually,
a
yes.
30 to 45 minute podcast session. I
Yes.
mean, there's been a couple times where we've talked about a couple of different things, but then you hit me with something heavy like today, and we got to learn about two things?
Yeah, two things, two big, highly impactful things for neurodivergent people.
I just want everyone to understand that I have 3.5 pages of notes on this. 3.5. It's not like
He's not lying.
Hey,
he's not even exaggerating.
Hey Russ, here's your 6 bullet points on the topic, and just, ask as you go. I've got 3.5 pages. I feel like this is a topic for another episode, actually.
It is, actually.
Really?
It is. This is very, like, you want to see my autism on display? These notes are 100% my autism on display. Because in my planning, in my putting this together, I knew, one, that these are heavy topics. Like, this is a lot. This episode is going to be a lot to talk about. And I did contemplate doing 2 separate topics, but decided that it would be interesting to put them together, and then, based on listener feedback or feedback we get from people, potentially taking each one separately, like later down the line, after we've looked at how they work together, if people want us to explore more how they are separate, we can do that as well. But
Okay.
yeah. So in thinking that, I was like, okay, I'm going to give Russ as comprehensive of a picture on this as I can. So we have very, long descriptions of both things.
Right.
And some pretty detailed, like, points to discuss, and like how to sort of frame our discussion. When usually I just give him, here are the talking points. Like, that's usually what it is. Sometimes I have some of this in here, but definitely not to the degree that I did for this episode.
So
hello,
I just
autism.
Right. I just want people to know that, I'm essentially studying for the SATs to set up for this episode. So thank you for that. So okay, we'll break it up though into the parts, and we'll do the first part. And so we have 2 things that we're learning about.
Yes.
But let's first talk about the emotional contagion.
Yes.
That sounds like I almost wanted to have a sound effect pop in every time we said contagion.
Right.
But let's learn about that. What is that?
Okay. So emotional contagion is when you sort of catch or absorb someone else's feelings. So imagine you're at work and your coworker is having a bad day, and you may have come in not having a bad day, but essentially your day ends up feeling not great because of how their mood is, or their feelings are. So you kind of take on somebody else's feelings.
Are you are you the person, like, if you're experiencing emotional contagion, you are the person that's catching it, not the person
Yes,
spreading it.
exactly. Exactly.
So how do you, I mean, it's like, this is going to be like this is so not off your notes, so apologies.
You're adding more.
I'm adding more over here on page 7. This is totally like, but this is when I read these notes
Hmm.
over the last few days. I
He's lying. I did this last night.
I think of the movie Ghostbusters 2.
Okay. Tell
There's
me
no
more
way
about that.
you were going to put this in the notes, but what
No.
they had was they had this mood slime, right? Where this, like, it was, instead of the green slime, it was this pink slime that was beneath New York City, and it affected human emotions, and it thrived on negativity, and
Ah,
it like made people more angry because it was
right.
there.
It took whatever
And
emotion was there and then amplified it.
right. So
Yeah.
once they had a positive emotion, all of a sudden they're all singing some song. Now, I'm not saying that Ghostbusters 2 was that good of a movie, was not as good as the original, but I feel like it does sort of, like, because I mean,
That's a
I've
good
used
metaphor.
that.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
I've used that
That
in
metaphor. Yeah.
when I didn't know what emotional contagion was
Right. Exactly.
before I read your book. Um, I'm just going to keep hitting you with that.
Yeah.
But it is really like you are the slime, right? You're like absorbing all of this and then
Hmm.
just pushing that back out. So how do
Right.
you change? How do you, like, make it so that that is not affecting you, or how do you make it so it's affecting you less, so that you're not going to pick up on that?
Well, I think it's important to note that this is, because the show is about neurodivergent people, that
Hmm.
emotional contagion tends to impact people who are neurodivergent more so than it does people who are neuronormative. And part of the reason for that is because um, both ADHD and autism are looking for patterns. And so you become very good at pattern recognition. Emotional contagion can happen in milliseconds. It can happen so quickly. So when you are someone who is hyper aware of patterns and you're really good at recognizing them, you're recognizing patterns. You don't even clock that your brain has picked up on it. So it's one of the reasons why this impacts people with neurodivergence so much. But as I often say in our episodes, one of the most important things that you can do is learn what these are. Like, you already had
Hmm.
an understanding of what emotional contagion is.
Totally.
Everybody does. Like, how I used to say this about class. Like, when I was a teacher, I could have one student completely change the environment in a classroom. Like, both in-person classes, but also in online classes. I had a class not very early on when I was teaching online where a student just hated every one of my assignments, and the discussions in that class sucked from the beginning of the class to the end, because
Hmm.
their contagion just made everybody feel like the class was pointless and there was
Right.
nothing to get out of it. And so, like, we have an understanding of what this is. What is important is to be able to name it, to be able to say this is the slime. I almost like combined those two words, saying slime. To recognize that slime is affecting you, and to know and be able to start to recognize your own feelings and how they differentiate perhaps from people around you. And that, brilliantly, thank you, Russ, is where our other topic comes in, which
Ooh.
is alexithymia.
Okay. Now tell me what that is.
So,
I can't say the word, because if I do, my little device here will ask me what I want to order.
oh, funny, mine is not registering it with that, but okay, yeah. It might at some point.
I actually practiced saying it beforehand, and it
Did you?
picked up. So I was like, okay, I better be careful here. I've got it on
That's
mute, so I
funny.
can actually say alexithymia.
Right. So alexithymia is having difficulty identifying or describing your emotions. So it is a process where and I love this. I learned this during the research, which is part of the reason why the notes for this are so extensive, because like I knew what alexithymia was, but I hadn't looked at or read any research about it. But literally, alexithymia means no words for feelings in Greek. Like that's what it means. No words for feelings. And that is like so deeply my experience a lot of the time, where I just cannot figure out what the feeling is. And so if you do have alexithymia and you do have a hard time identifying your emotions, now distinction, this isn't that you don't have emotions, which some people might want to experience their life this way. It's not that you don't have emotions, it's just it is difficult to name and identify your emotions. So imagine that it's difficult for you to name and identify your emotions. You are hyper aware of pattern recognition and how people interact. And so when you go into an environment with someone and they are emotionally activated for whatever reason, they're angry or they're frustrated or whatnot, or they're happy, and you go in and you just pick up on all those cues and you can't identify your feelings inside you, of course you're going to be like, oh, I feel this.
Right.
Because you are recognizing what the other person is feeling and you're picking up on that more strongly and with more clarity than you can where you're at yourself.
I feel like the things that I'm thinking about are, like there's the business side of things that I'm thinking about. But first I'm thinking about the stage thing, right? Like
Yeah.
this is almost like when you're on stage and you say something that's, like I did something about, like there was an improv thing and one of my lines was, oh, so you just want to be friends. And actually people like went, aw,
Yes.
like
Yes.
people felt the emotion. So that
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
is a form of this,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Or getting people to laugh. I've had
Or
people
getting people to
boo,
laugh.
which
Yeah.
intentionally, which was great. Um, but it's that. So we're
To a
really
degree. Yeah.
trained from this,
Yeah.
like right from the beginning,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I
right? And
mean,
this is
yeah, little kids know how to make you laugh, right? Like
mhm.
how quickly do little children, like that was amazing to me as a parent to watch how clearly and how quickly my daughter started to pick up on what she could do to get what kind of reactions, because that is, I mean, that is from birth. Like, that, smiling at your children, smiling at your baby, even when they can't like talk or tell you how they're feeling, like they still pick up on all
Mhm.
that, right? So they're still picking up on all of this emotion. And yeah, that's one of the things that actors are playing on. Like it's, how if somebody yawns, you want to
Right.
yawn too, right? Like
Just
it's just
talking about it right now,
right,
somebody is
makes it
yawning.
like all you have to do, like, and that's what this is. That's essentially the same thing, that it's you picking up on all of those. Like you see someone else yawn and you're like, oh, that would feel good. I mean, and because yawning brings some extra oxygen to your brain, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, it is a very natural, it's not bad. And it sounds bad because like we think contagions and we think COVID,
Uh-huh.
or the flu
Right.
or the cold or
Right.
whatever. That it's not bad. It's just how we work.
Mhm. So how do we okay, we learn how to work something or we learn that's how we work.
Right.
How do we work it? Like to make it to make it so maybe we're not picking up on those other negative moods that are being thrown at us.
Well, a lot of it is, learning how to identify your own emotions. So let me quiz you a little bit.
Okay.
Can we do a little experiment or a little quiz
Mm,
here?
sure, I can edit it out
I can edit it out.
if it doesn't work.
If it doesn't work, sure. Okay, so I want you to think about a time a time recently that you have been emotionally activated, and something that was really powerfully emotional for you.
Okay.
Okay, you don't like have to tell us what it is necessarily, but just keep that now in your mind. Pull as much detail from that moment as you can. Like, what you were wearing, what you could see, what you could smell, where you were. Just like pull as much of it. Try to get us back into that moment as clearly as you can.
Okay.
Okay. What were you feeling? What was the emotion?
Um, I was, I mean, it's actually now I'm doing the alexithymia thing because it's hard for me to actually describe.
This is kind of my point.
Right.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, I was, because the thing that threw me off actually was thinking about all of the other different things, because I went from feeling like just sort of content
Mhm.
to feeling sort of upset,
Okay.
like, or, angry, I
Yeah.
guess. Right.
Okay.
So I flipped that, and actually you making me think of the setting actually made me think more of the content feeling than the
Okay.
angry feeling, because I was thinking about like what I was feeling prior to
Okay.
the trigger that made me upset.
So when you think about that content feeling, where does that feeling in your body? What is the physical manifestation for you of that contentment?
Oh, it's sort of a for me, it's sort of a slouchy sitting in this chair.
Okay. So
It's just
slouching.
like
Yeah.
just a relaxed, like,
Yeah, but where's
you
the
know,
feeling in your body?
the feeling in my body.
Yeah,
I
where's the contentment in your body?
Jeez, you're really you're grilling me today.
Mhm.
First the notes, now this. I would say, I mean, it's probably like a shoulder thing in a way. Like it's
Okay.
a, like
So
just
your
a
shoulders are
relaxed like
relaxed.
posture.
Yeah.
That's the slouchy. That's the just
That's the
content
slouchy.
and
The
relaxed.
contentment meant your
Hmm.
shoulders were relaxed. You weren't feeling tension in your shoulders.
Right. And
And go ahead.
sorry, to the reason to that is because when I got angry, like the whole thing just changed. The position
That's
changed. The shoulders went up.
mhm.
The slouchy was no longer there, and it
And
was
then
just a
where
slight
was your anger
switch.
in your body?
Probably more in like the core, just
It
like,
hit
oh
you lower, right? It hit you
yeah,
deeper
right.
in your and the tensing of your muscles is defense, right? Because
Hmm.
you
That's
you're you
right. If an
shifted,
animal's
right?
attacking you, that's
Yeah,
what you're gonna do, right?
exactly. You go into that defense.
Hmm.
So one of the
Hmm.
things that really helps in terms of learning to identify your emotions is this process I just put you through, where we have been taught a lot to intellectualize our feelings. And I thought for years that I was really in tune with my emotions because I could intellectualize them so much. And what I realized is that that was part of my process of managing my alexithymia. I could think about my emotions amazingly, which is why I'm like an A
Hmm.
plus person in counseling. Like why my counselors always love working with me because I can think through my emotions and I can articulate so well. And what I have realized in the last few years is that thinking about your emotions and feeling them in your body are completely different things. Like completely different things. And so learning where you're like when I start feeling shame and I get embarrassed, I feel shame in my throat. Like I feel like I need to silence myself. That's part of my process in feeling shame is I need to silence myself. My throat will get constricted. I will have a hard
Hmm.
time talking. I will like all of that. That is how I feel shame, right? And who knows where the root cause of that is. But now that I know sometimes when the emotional contagion kicks in or when I'm in a moment where I don't know what I'm feeling, if I stop and I check in with my body and I go, you're feeling this in your throat, something is embarrassing you and you're feeling shame for some reason. Now I can identify it.
Hmm.
So you recognizing that your anger sits lower in your body, closer to the core of your body, is a really powerful thing because sometimes your anger, like I suppress anger a lot. I very naturally suppress anger because I was taught anger was not a good, quote unquote, good emotion to have.
Hmm.
So I suppressed my
Right.
anger a lot. And so, learning to sort of unsuppress it or unbox it has been really important. So that's a really important lesson you just learned about yourself Relaxment, you know when you feel relaxed because your shoulders are back, and you know your anger sits low in your body.
Right. And what's interesting about that too is just like people are more or often more in tune, like physically, like, oh, I know my stomach hurts,
Right.
or I know this is feeling. So
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting to line that up with the things that maybe some are not as familiar with, which,
Right.
the emotional side of things. I like that. You
Yes,
taught me something.
I did. All of my notes have paid off.
So, okay, I have an app on my phone
Mm-hmm.
that asks me like twice a day, what's my mood? What am I feeling? So it's sort
Yep.
of like I'm journaling my moods. And I'm
Right.
sort of like also thinking about like what else was I doing at that particular time?
Mm-hmm.
And like, okay, well, let's do more of the things that are making me feel good and
Right.
less of the things that when I'm not feeling so good.
Right.
What I've realized really is a lot of mine is like around sleep. And if I'm getting enough sleep, I'm a lot better. But
Yeah, definitely.
um like I would assume that like the whole journaling and looking at those so that you can learn when those
Mm-hmm.
emotions are happening, and
Absolutely.
also I would guess when those emotions are yours or not.
Yes,
Am I
definitely.
just feeling somebody else's?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is
What
this
what
mine?
changed? That was one of the reasons why I wanted you to envision the setting so completely. Why I really
Mhm.
wanted to pull you. Like I could have, and I did debate this, but I was like, this is really not fair. I thought about just triggering you, like seeing if I could like trigger you and like make you mad at me.
Nice. Well, you
But
know
I
how. No.
but I did think about that, and I'm like, no, that's not fair. But I was thinking that like if I could get you to envision it clearly enough, you would pull out exactly what you did, which was a step in your process you hadn't done. And possibly, now I'm not going to discount the journaling you're doing because I think it's really valuable. But I do think in your journaling process in this, I would encourage you not to just let it be intellectualization, right? Where you're not like, oh, I felt angry and, or whatever. Like, oh, I felt my stomach drop because, or I felt my shoulders tighten and my stomach drop, and I was red in my fist. Like I clench. Like when I'm angry and I'm stressed out, I clench my hands, I clench my jaw, like, I get tight. And so like I would encourage you to, in that journaling process, start thinking about where the feelings are living in your body, because until you
Mhm.
start making that next step, it's still living up in your brain, which, and it's not bad. It's just, it's not the root of it, right? It's not getting into what helps with identifying and with learning how to feel your feelings is that step of trying to identify where it is in your body.
What does this do for like I've got a few questions here, but like when you're experiencing these things, how does it impact, like, let's start with a relationship. How does it impact a
Well,
relationship?
think about like,
So
you
like,
live with somebody, right?
right,
If you're
when you get a bad mood, you're gonna like take on some of that, right?
right, like that is part of the, I don't want to say danger, but that is part of the challenge. Challenge is a good word. That is part of the challenge of living with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Like is having to take those steps to recognize when you are being influenced by their emotional contagion and what is theirs versus what is yours. And
Right.
I was trained to manage the feelings of everybody around me in my family, and
Mm-hmm.
this was the work largely assigned female at birth bodies did in my family. It's what my mom did, it's what my grandmother did. They managed the feelings of everybody in the family. And
Right.
in order to do that, a lot of the time they had to discount or ignore their own feelings. And they were essentially always operating in a state of emotional contagion, like where they were always worried about other people's feelings. So, you know, living with someone or being around someone all the time makes that process of learning your feelings harder. Like, because you do have to go through this step of, if you have difficulty recognizing your feelings and your emotions, and you're around somebody maybe who is more emotionally demonstrative, and people don't always know when they're pushing their feelings out on someone else.
Right. Right. And if you are, like, how do you prevent yourself from doing that? Or how do you recognize that you're doing that?
I find it to be important to take a moment to center myself before I allow myself to react to things. I can't always do
Okay.
that. Sometimes you're too caught in the emotion. I'm a human being. I'm going to mess up. And when you mess up, you apologize and you repair and you own the fact that you messed up, etc. But being able to stop and think about that body part, like if I'm starting to get triggered by something my daughter is doing, I have to stop and think about not where I am in my brain. Like, I'm frustrated we're late to getting to school because this hasn't happened. Not that, but to stop and recognize my shoulders are tense. My stomach is feeling ill, like whatever it is that has started me feeling that way. I have to
Mm-hmm.
stop and take a moment and do that check-in with myself and go, okay, where are you at? Because sometimes, like, when I want to feel connected to someone, a lot of the times, I feel compelled to take on their feelings, good or bad. I still feel like I need to, and that's how I will connect with them. And so I needed to start recognizing, okay, well, this isn't where I'm at. I'm not angry right now. They're angry right now. And that's okay. They can be angry. It's okay for them to be angry. And I don't have to do anything about it.
I can see. Okay. So there's dealing with things at home, and then there's dealing with things at work.
Yep.
Now, at home, generally it's okay. Maybe it's a one-on-one or a one-on, however many people you have in your house. You're
Right.
probably going to have more people at your job,
Yes.
at where you're working, or,
You have
employees or
more
team
opportunities
members.
for emotional contagion in a larger
Totally.
group of people. Yes.
And I mean, the thing is, like, I I would say that this could really just take down an entire team
Yeah.
or an entire company
Oh, I think
just because
about,
of
like,
of one person.
I'm trying to think of a pop culture example of this, but think about a movie where, like, The Devil Wears Prada, right? So she is like this fashion person or whatever, and everybody kowtows to how she feels that day. So they set the
Hmm.
entire day up to make sure she gets everything she wants exactly when she wants it and exactly the way she wants it to be. Because her emotional contagion is so high, right? She's so contagious. She's the
Right.
flu, right? She's
Hmm.
norovirus. I don't know, whatever. Like, she's something that's very highly contagious that you don't have to be around very often to get sick, right? And because everybody's jobs and therefore their safety and their well-being and everything is dependent on how that boss reacts. The entire culture of that office, that entire culture of that team is built around managing their emotional response to things. And that
Right.
is, I mean, it's a cliche for a reason, right? I think that there's probably, a dozen movies where that is like the premise, right?
Right. Right. I mean, I'm sort of thinking of, like, The Office. I mean, I'm sure
Hmm.
there's probably, something in there where, it just seems like they're all panicky people, but like, just, grabbing, I don't know. But thinking about, like, offices that I've actually, worked in, it does sort of take one person with, like, the bad attitude,
Hmm.
or, whatever, that sort of spreads. And,
Yep.
I mean, I like picking the bad seed can, and taking that person out can sometimes, make that change, but that might not always be the best decision to,
Right.
lose that one person, because
Hmm.
maybe they're your top performer, but they're just bad attitude. And, what are you going to do? Um, uh, in many cases, yes, it'll just be like, let's lose this
Right.
person because we need to,
Right. Because that's the
make everything
benefit of,
better for everyone.
benefit of everybody. Right. Yep.
Yeah. So
But I mean, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was going to say, learning about these things, like I can't quite imagine how different many of my jobs would be if somebody I worked with knew that their emotional reaction was impacting the group as heavily as it was.
Right.
Right. Like, you set the tone. And as a leader, like if you're a leader, if you are in a leadership position of any kind, you are setting the tone for how everybody else reacts to that. And you are modeling so much more than you know. If you get quiet, if you get reflective, if you give yourself the space to take that moment, like I said, I take with my daughter, I have to stop and think about where I am, what I'm feeling in my body. If you are modeling that to your employees instead of modeling reaction or reactivity,
Right.
just that alone would start to dismantle some of this, right? And I just had a conversation this week with a former boss of mine. I'm trying to sort of shape my leadership style, and this was the one boss who I worked with absolutely beautifully. And so I asked her, how did you come up with your management style? Like, how do you know how well you manage so many different people so well? How do you do that? And she's like, well, I take everybody as I have a different style for every person that I work with. Like, I recognize what they need from me as a leader, and I try to give them what I know they need. And
Mhm.
what she said to me, which was very, very profound and a good reminder for me, is she's like, you hold yourself to such a high standard. She's like, and I knew I couldn't try to back you off of that because it would be insulting to you. Like, I knew you wanted to be this high achiever. So I knew that if I just let you do that, she's like, I never asked you to do more. And I'm like, no, you didn't. She's like, because I didn't have to. She's like, I literally didn't have to. You were always performing at a really high level. And I knew if I tried to pull you down from that, that would, or I didn't treat you and have high expectations for you, you would be insulted and you would do less good. You wouldn't do as good work
Hmm.
if I treated you like you needed to like ratchet down. I was concerned that you were doing too much and you had such a high standard, but I also knew that that wasn't the way to turn you around on things. And I was just like, that was really profoundly
Right.
important to me.
If it's true that this, like, the negative or positive emotions are contagious.
No feelings are negative or positive. Feelings are all information.
Okay. So
So just to,
if
I cannot, that's a pet peeve. Like, I do not want us talking about
oh,
bad feelings.
this is perfect. Then I'm going to say, I'm going to totally mess you up here. Then let's turn this into a superpower.
Oh, God.
Am I just trying to trigger you now? You're going to throw
Yes.
stuff at
I
me.
was like, I want to throw this at you.
I know. But okay, so if happiness, sadness, whatever is contagious,
Yes.
isn't it true that also something like confidence or,
Yes.
like things like
Yes.
that perhaps if a leader is more confident, let's say, in themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're putting that out there,
Yep.
they trust themselves, they're building themselves up in their own mind a little bit, isn't that also contagious? And is
Yes.
that a part of this?
Yeah. I mean, if you're a leader and you're leading from a place of believing in yourself and you give that to your team, you know, working with my boss that I talked to this week, I always knew that she respected my expertise. And
Mhm.
I knew that she would let me make decisions based on what I knew because I knew she respected my knowledge. And she was only able to do that because she could sit in a place of confidence herself. Like just to be able to take a step back and say, I'm going to manage every person differently because I'm going to manage them in a way that works for them, takes confidence. Because a lot of traditional management thing is, oh, you need to treat all your employees the same. Well, why? Like, I get, like, you don't want to like play favorites necessarily, but is this a process of playing favorites because she manages everybody specific to the management needs that they have? Is that playing favorites, or is that a strategic decision?
Right. Right. I mean, I feel like, I mean, the whole managing people differently thing, right? As a person that has managed a ton of people
Mm-hmm.
throughout my career, it's like, it's difficult but essential, and it is more about listening and paying
Yes.
attention than it
Mm-hmm.
is about like putting on different characters for people,
Yeah.
like when you say, or when that, with the person you're talking about,
Yeah.
mystery person A, who we're not going to name, is talking about this, we're not talking about putting on, we're not talking about masking, right?
No. No, we're not
As
talking
we
about
have talked about
masking.
in a previous
As
episode.
we
See,
have.
I'm learning,
Very good.
Regina.
You are learning. I love this. I'm
But
so excited.
we're talking about it. It is listening. It's paying
Uh-huh.
attention.
It's
It's
authentic. Like, yeah.
understanding, and it's,
Yeah.
yes.
It's
That's where I was
authentic.
leading.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that is it. Like, the more you know yourself, the more you're able to do a process of identifying your emotions, you as a leader are going to be more effective. Like, if you don't
Right.
recognize that you're operating from a reactive space and you go into a team meeting and your partner poured salt in your coffee that morning instead of sugar or whatever, like, you're mad because you had, your coffee order made wrong. I don't know what it is.
Right.
And that has impacted your entire being, and you have not looked at where that emotion is, and you have not processed through how angry or frustrated you are. And you go into your team and you're like, why don't you have XYZ done? And you come from that like hot activated place, your whole team is going to be like, what's happening here?
Right. Right.
And
Well,
that's not going to be good for anybody.
yeah, and I mean, I would think, I mean, the one size fits all management style, it excludes people that
Yes,
process emotions and communicate differently. It's more,
absolutely.
this is more, neurodivergent in inclusion, that
Yes.
style, right? And
Yes,
it's not
exactly.
just that, it's
Hmm.
everybody. You're including
Hmm.
everybody,
Yeah.
which is great.
Yeah.
So when I think about the alexithymia side of this, I'm thinking about the like year-end review, performance reviews, right?
Mm-hmm.
With a person uh, that really doesn't know how they're feeling, or might not be able to articulate how they're
Yes,
feeling.
exactly. Hmm.
How do they do that performance review, or even like any kind of conflict resolution, or even feedback, with, clients or other team members? Like, how do they do that?
Well, I mean, if they're masking,
Right.
then they're
Exactly.
just going to pretend that it's okay. Um, you know, Guilty of having done that many times through my own performance reviews. Um, to have an authentic experience of that, what I would say I would need as a neurodivergent employee, if I had a leader I was working with that was giving me, this kind of thing, I would need time. So if the expectation in the review is you're going to come in and the employee is going to respond to XYZ thing, good or bad, negative or positive feedback, expecting them to like have an immediate reaction or be able to say, oh yeah, I can fix that or whatnot, without them being able to take the time to process it and without being able to go away and process it. The last time I went through a review like this, it was very much very structured and handled by HR, et cetera. So, I got
Mhm.
a chance to write up my notes. My boss wrote up her notes, and then we reviewed them. And then, even from there, it was, I did not have to decide in the meeting I had with her reviewing my notes. I didn't have to decide what the action plan was. I could go and sit with it, and then we could write an action plan later. And that I think is the important step, being able to have that time. Because if you do have alexithymia and you do have a difficulty identifying your emotions when you're in a high stakes environment, and performance reviews are always going to be high stakes because your job and your income and all the things that we have to have under our capitalist structure are threatened in that. Right? So you do want to make sure that you are tracking, that you have the time to process, so you can step away and try to figure out where your emotions are.
I'm putting you in the manager position here, the leader position. What about, I mean, I've had team members like this. They're completely silent. They don't say anything. They don't actually complain, but they are upset inside.
Right.
Something blows up, and then we talk about it, and I actually say, why didn't you bring this up? And the answer might be, well, I didn't know I was feeling that way.
Exactly. Yep.
That is this, right?
Yes. A lot of the time it is. Yeah. Yep.
Right.
It is that it took that time and that distance for them to get to a point where they could understand what the feelings were.
Right.
And if they don't feel like they belong, like if they don't feel like, if you have a team member who is behaving that way consistently, it might be one, they might be somebody who's just not, if they're in a group situation, it might be someone who is not comfortable communicating verbally in a environment like that. Like they might need one-on-one time, they might need two-on-one time, like whatever. They might need a smaller group to be able to feel like they have a voice. But if at some base level, your employees don't feel like they belong on the team and they don't feel like you are supporting them, that is the biggest impactor of performance. Like statistically, that is the biggest impactor of performance. If you don't feel like you belong, you don't feel like you are, part of the team, and you don't have that psychological safety where you could turn to your boss and say, I don't know how I'm feeling about this right now. I need some time to process. How scary of a sentence is that to say to somebody who has authority over you? If you don't feel safe enough, if you don't feel like your contributions are valued enough because you're not performing in a way and not working in a way that is traditionally valued, like, that sense of belonging is unbelievably valuable and necessary.
If somebody on your team is not going to express their feelings about something, they may not also express like their confusion about something,
Exactly.
or their stress about something.
They might not tell you they're having like XYZ happening at home that's impacting their performance because they don't feel safe enough to do so.
Right. So then leading to burnout, leading to, lower performance.
Exactly. Yeah. All the metrics.
Impacting everything. Right. Right.
And, leading not just, those things that will impact staying in the job, leading to people leaving. That is one of the reasons why people leave, because they feel like they don't belong somewhere and they feel like their contributions are not valuable. And then that's why they leave.
Right.
And it's, this is hard work. Like this is not a small thing.
Right.
Just want to acknowledge that, like, if you want to lead from a place where you are taking these theories and you are creating a workplace that is inclusive like this. Now, this is definitely going to powerfully impact your neurodivergent employees, but it's going to powerfully impact everybody. Like anybody who's neuronormative or neurodivergent, this is going to powerfully impact how they work.
There's companies, there's owners, there's managers, and I don't know how many company owners I've talked to over the years, right?
Right.
I mean, over on my DIY for Business podcast, and then, but also just like in consulting, there's no there's no training guide for
Sure.
the owner of a company. You're doing it. You're
Yep.
creating it yourself, right? You're creating everything from the ground up generally.
Yep.
And it's a tough, and managing is tough, leading is tough. But some of those folks might feel that are, these leaders might feel that that only professional emotions are acceptable. I'm throwing air quotes,
Nice.
right?
Yes, exactly.
Professional or
Right.
positive even.
Or positive. Yeah. Yeah.
Like they may feel that way,
hmm
right? Like that's the only thing that's okay in the
Right.
workplace, but that is so unrealistic, right?
It is so unrealistic. Yeah.
Like how
Yeah.
how do you and I mean, you and I can say that that's so unrealistic, but
Right.
somebody out there may not understand that
Right.
it's and
Well,
and
I mean,
honestly,
yeah,
they're probably not the people that are listening to the show.
they are probably not.
But they're the
And maybe
people, the
they will at
exact
some
people
point.
that you might need to help, right?
Right.
So
Exactly.
what would
Well,
you say to them to try to cross them over the line to make them understand that sharing the emotion is okay? It's part of the process.
what I would like to do is change the world fundamentally.
That would be nice.
you know, um, and like come back to that point that I made to you during this podcast of feelings are not good or bad. Feelings are information, and they're data points that we are if you allow them, and if you allow yourself to process them, can be tools for you to succeed, tools for you to benefit, tools for your team to benefit. Um, you're never going to lead a team that has just the emotions you want them to have.
Right.
And being able to recognize that people might get frustrated by your choices. Like the other thing that my former boss said to me this week, she's like, yeah, I learned that part of your process was, when you needed to talk to me and it was something urgent you needed to talk to me about because something was happening. And we would get on a call and you just needed space to rant. You just needed to talk it out. And when you finished, I would say to you, we can't do that because it's unrealistic. And I'm like, I know, but. And she said, I knew you needed that time to let that out. Like that was part of her strategy for me, was knowing I would come around to what needed to be done and what the proper process was going to be. Part of my process in coming to that was needing to offload whatever my frustrations were, right? And that is like those weren't positive and professional emotions a lot of the time.
Right.
There was often a lot of frustration, a lot of anger, and probably a few swear words. Like, try not to curse on the show, but like, me really well,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you when not on mic, you're just constantly
It's just
swearing.
every other word.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very rare actually to hear you swear. Come to think of it, I don't think I hear it very often, but I'm going to
If we
pay
get to play
attention.
board games together anytime in the near future, that is where
Oh,
I
gotcha.
swear. I
That's when it
cannot
drops. Okay.
stop myself from swearing when I'm gaming. I cannot edit it. I am very careful because I was always really careful as a teacher to not alienate my students with, curse words or
Mhm.
swear words or words that might have made them uncomfortable, because I knew as a teacher my use of words was so much more, had such a greater impact on them, and I didn't want to alienate anybody. So I was always really careful with my filter when I was teaching.
So, yeah, I learned in, like in the early radio days, if there's a microphone, don't swear.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There's a microphone in the room.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not always so great at that, but I try. Okay, let me do a scenario for you, just because this
Okay.
is what's going on in my head. I'm opening my head up again to you here.
Yay.
We're going to say just person A and person B.
Okay.
Person A um, is experiencing emotions. They're not quite sure what those emotions are.
Okay.
Okay. Um, person A also wants to talk to person B about those particular emotions and
Okay.
kind of what they're feeling. Perhaps they just want to talk it through. They
Right.
don't exactly know what it is, but they want to
Mhm.
talk it through with the person B. Person B is feeling not so great right now,
Mhm.
feeling some sort of sense of, let's
They're
say, they're
activated or
angry,
agitated. Yeah. Okay.
they're agitated, they're angry, they're not in a place where they want to hear that. So they need to tell person A, I need some time. But
Yeah.
person A just doesn't want to hear
That.
and feels agitated and irritated by that. And the way
Right.
that person B said that they want to be,
Right.
not bothered right now, maybe they said it in a way like that was not
Right.
so nice.
Yeah.
How do you resolve a situation like that?
That's a
I
hard
put you on
one.
the spot,
You did.
right?
You did put me on the spot. And it's, I have a lot. There's, 4 or 5 thoughts that are going on in my head. The first is that I've already given the advice of like taking a beat before you respond.
Mm-hmm.
Both person A and B need to do.
Mm-hmm. Right.
If person B snapped at person A because they were asking for now, and it depends. Okay, so part of this is based on how person A approached person B. So, a friend of mine has a phrase, and it's when someone comes to him to talk about something, he will often ask, "Okay, are we bitching or are we fixing?
Right.
Are you needing to just externally process and you don't need me to help you fix this? Or are you looking to me for help and solutions?" So presenting, I need someone to hear me right now, right? So this is what my old boss knew inherently. I just needed someone to hear me sometimes, right? She knew that. She had just picked up on, you just needed this time to process, and I knew you would understand the decision that was made after you got it out, right? So that's part of it. So being able to approach somebody who you need to talk to about something and not just launching into a diatribe over XYZ thing that's on your mind and that's upset you.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the first piece of advice I would say in this scenario. Person A needs to make sure they are centered enough and are not coming in hot and just trauma dumping or, offloading on this person unfairly. Because what happens in situations like that often, if somebody comes in hot and just wants to spew stuff all over you, they feel better. But the emotional contagion has happened, and that person B, who may have already been activated, feels more activated and feels worse because there wasn't any agency and they didn't get to agree to, I'm in a space to listen to you.
So I'm assuming now, if I can't say what my emotions are, if I'm having problems
Mm-hmm.
like saying what they are
Identifying.
and
Mm-hmm. Yep.
identifying, even in my own
Yep.
head, like I
Or
can't
your
figure out what
body.
they are.
In your
Well,
body. You
then
can't pick them out in
also,
your body.
right.
Yes.
But let's say I don't know what they are.
Yeah.
And now if somebody's looking at me because I don't know what my current emotional state is, they also can't pick up any kind of visual cues to understand, or even any, you know,
Sure.
any clues at all that, like what I'm feeling. And they come up to me and they now, do the trauma dump. And
Yeah.
now I like, and maybe the other, the person A, I'm just throwing myself as B in this scenario just to make it easier, because I was
Right.
confused by A and B and I don't want audience to be confused. So they come up and they do this to me, and maybe they're not feeling like they're fine. They just want to say these things. But now I've overreacted and I've said something, and now they're now
Activated.
experiencing and grabbing on, and it just feels like it could just be. And that's
Oh,
why
yeah.
that's where this scenario came out of, where I just feel like
Mm-hmm.
it could just be stacking and stacking and stacking and growing and just getting bigger and bigger. And then all of a sudden you've got the sewers of New York and pink slime everywhere, and Ghostbusters 2.
And Ghostbusters 2 is written.
Right. I
and
mean,
I,
it
and
just feels like that, right?
yeah,
I mean, like how
right.
yeah.
That's where you have to be aware to step out of the cycle. And that's where understanding where your feelings are in your body becomes important, right? Because if you're not recognizing in that moment that you were already activated when they came up to you, and now you have activated them, whatever, anger or frustration you were already feeling has been pushed out onto them, and they are now activated in the same way. And then you're just, ping-ponging off each other. And like you said, it's stacking, until you can get to a point where you can stop and check in with yourself and figure out where you're feeling. That's all that's going to happen. You're just going to bounce off each other, and it's going to stack, and it's going to get bigger, and you're going to have a big fight, and it's going to be stupid. And then you're going to be like, why are we fighting about this? And you're like, I don't know. Why are we fighting about this? Right. And everybody's like confused because you don't know where any of it has come from. And so that's where the moments of like, I don't navigate this well. So I will 100% say that this scenario that you have painted is one of those things that I'm changing now in my life, because I've gotten to a point where I can stop and think through. And I am getting better, not perfect, but better at stopping and checking in with my emotions before I respond. And that means checking in physically. And I have to think about where my heart rate is, what my breathing's like, where's the tension in my body, all of those things. And learning how to ground myself out of reacting, right? And it's really helpful to, breathing helps me. Breathing does not help my daughter. Like, I cannot tell her to like try to center herself with breathing, because she just gets frustrated. It is not a calming thing for her. So for her, I will often ask her what she can, to pick out 3 green things in the room, like something that like triggers some other part of her brain, and then she can kind of like come back into her body after that. But she has to go through like a mediator, a medium step in that too, before she can kind of, pivot back into things. So those are strategies that you'd have to learn yourself. And until you can get sensitive enough to know you're reacting, and you're reacting out of an old habit, you're reacting out of old feelings, you're reacting out of whatever it is that's coming up for you, until you can get to the point where you can kind of like stop yourself in the process, there's not going to be change. You're going to continue to live in that scenario.
All right. So very complex topics today.
I mean, right? I guess
you were right. I needed maybe even a couple more pages of notes.
You mean I didn't give enough information?
Exactly. Man, if only you could have given me more. That would have been very helpful. Hey, but it is something though that not everybody is going to understand from this one episode. And I
agree.
Yes, I think we did a decent job getting the information out there, but there is so much more to learn on this.
And I do think we have other episodes here. I think if we wanted to do some scenario-based episodes on this, or if listeners wanted to send in scenarios that they'd like us to discuss, that would be fascinating. I would love to hear how this kind of manifests in people's lives, and the way they'd like to have us talk about it.
And then, of course, if there's somebody out there, if there's a business owner that wants you to come and take a look at their business, their operations, their culture, if they wanted to reach out to you for that, how would they do so?
Please check out my website, or we're talking about the offerings. I have, detailed offerings for what I can do for your business. Really what I think my strength is I have a lot of experience in systems thinking, right? I can really come in and see how your culture is impacting your workflow and your productivity. And that comes from my years, not just as a teacher and constantly changing cultures, and every class that I ever taught had its own culture and its own life. So coming in and being able to look at your business and see where maybe some of your pitfalls are, maybe there are things that are getting in the way, some really simple things that you might be able to change to drive productivity and help support your employees. So I'm going to be offering in the near future kind of a culture checkup, where I can just come in and do a really quick consult where you'd fill out a survey, and then I'd look at the survey results and talk to you about it and give you kind of a checkup, and to see like what are some quick things we can do to change and modify our culture to better support not just neurodivergent employees, but all employees. Thanks for listening. If you've ever felt emotionally overwhelmed and couldn't quite explain why, Or you've caught someone else's mood like it was contagious. You're not alone. Emotional contagion and alexithymia are deeply human, especially for those of us who are neurodivergent. Understanding them can be a powerful step towards self-awareness, boundaries, and healing. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love it if you share it with someone else who might need it too, or leave a review to help others find the show. Until next time, remember, your emotions matter even when they're hard to name.